Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Before we get to today's episode, please note, this information is for general educational purposes only and is not a recommendation to buy, hold, or sell any investment or financial product. Turpentine is an acquisition of A16Z Holdings LLC and is not a bank, investment advisor, or broker-dealer. This podcast includes paid promotional advertisements, and individuals and companies featured or advertised during this podcast are not endorsing AH Capital or any of its affiliates, including but not limited to A16Z Perennial Management LP. Similarly, Turpentine is not endorsing affiliates, individuals, or any entities featured on this podcast. All investments involve risk, including the possible loss of capital. Past performance is no guarantee of future results, and the opinions presented cannot be viewed as an indicator of future performance. Before making decisions with legal, tax, or accounting effects, you should consult appropriate professionals. Information is from sources deemed reliable on the date of publication, but Turpentine does not guarantee its accuracy. Now let's get started.
Hello.
Hey,
How's it going, man?
it's going all right.
Cool.
I got my little hat today. It's a rabbit with it's like also a steamed bun, and it's drinking boba. It's just basically, everything you need.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, we were back at after a week break, and lots happened in the world. New conflict in India, Pakistan, and
Yeah, it's already over. I mean, it'll be back.
yeah. Why don't you give just a quick recap for those who weren't staying tuned or not super familiar with this conflict, as to how should people are more familiar with Ukraine, Russia, more familiar with Israel, Palestine. India, Pakistan has also been a sort of long-standing tension zone. How should we sort of compare and contrast or sort of evaluate this conflict? And we could just unpack what happened.
Well, yeah. So it's one of these territorial conflicts where two countries, claim some of each other's territory. India claims part of Pakistan's territory, but doesn't really care about doing much about it. So there's this part of the old unified India called Kashmir. And when Britain left, decolonized the region, whatever, they divided it up. There was partition, right? So you had partition between India and Pakistan. Pakistan was supposed to be the Muslim homeland. India was supposed to be the Hindu homeland. And immediately after partition, of course, there were still plenty of Muslims living in the Hindu homeland and still plenty of Hindus living in the Muslim homeland. So everybody just started beating everybody up. And so, Hindus beat up the Muslims in India, and Muslims beat up the Hindus in Pakistan and kicked them out. And there was ethnic cleansing on both sides. And then you had the birth of modern day India and Pakistan. Meanwhile, both claimed the other part of this split territory, Kashmir. And so India claimed Pakistan's part, but doesn't really care about grabbing it because honestly, it's got a lot less people and it's just not that interesting of a piece of territory. India's piece had the more people, the bigger city, Srinagar, and just, more of the ancestral, sort of like traditional stuff. And so Pakistan is like, well, we're going to get that back. We are the warrior race. They were really big on that in like the 40s, through 60s, big on like warrior culture. We're the Khans, the Mughals. We're gonna beat up you wimpy Hindus and So anyway, they attacked and they failed. In 1947, they tried to take Kashmir and they failed, and India just sort of beat them up. They tried again in 1965 and they failed, and India sort of beat them up. And then, so that was the last time they really made a serious military attempt to retake Kashmir. What instead they started doing was sponsoring terrorism to sort of just keep poking in India, poke, sponsoring these Islamist terrorist groups based either in the Pakistani part of Kashmir or, sometimes across the border, like cross-border terrorism, or just based in other parts of Pakistan, whatever. Like there's like Lashkar-e-Taiba, like there's a couple others. Anyway, so then they just sort of launch these terrorist attacks in India and occasionally kill some people. And then India gets really mad and like bombs Pakistan. And then in 1999, they fought a war. They actually had some ground combat in the mountains, featuring some of the most hardcore combat ever seen. Just people scaling like sheer ice cliffs to like fight each other like on the sides of mountains is nuts. And so they had that, and then they had in 2019 they had like one of these where there was a terrorist attack, and then India like bombed some places in Pakistan. Pakistan shot down an Indian jet, captured the pilot. You paraded him around, sent him home, and that, each side was like, victory. We declare victory. So something like this happened this time. There's a terrorist attack from launched with help from groups in Pakistan. India bombed them. Pakistan then bombed India. India bombed Pakistan. So they went back and forth and were like trying to shoot down each other's jets and then like bomb each other's military bases, launch missile strikes and drone strikes and stuff like that. It was bigger, much bigger than the conflict in 2019. Like they went at it harder this time, but eventually stopped, and so now they've stopped. But it surprised a lot of people, including me, how far they were willing to go in terms of like India was blasting some of Pakistan's like main military bases, most important military bases in the country of Pakistan, and just blasting them. And then Pakistan was launching attacks like deep into India with a bunch of jets. They were flying jets into India, just like bombing. So that was a big deal. And I think it shows how little of a deterrent effect American power now is. Sort of the crumbling of Pax Americana is going to be a consistent theme. I think that's why you've seen the Gaza war go harder than otherwise. That's why you've seen the Ukraine war. That's why you've seen, and I think this is another case of like, there's no cop around to stop these people from fighting anymore. There's just local deterrence, and that's it. So I think that's what's going on.
And what do you think should be the U.S. posture in these conflicts? We did get involved a little bit in Ukraine, Russia, and we're obviously involved in the conflict in the Middle East, but it seems that we're not as involved in this one.
I think it has to do with our interests. I don't think we should necessarily have one sort of overarching thing. It just depends on how much of an interest we have. So like, if Russia takes over Ukraine, then it conscripts all the Ukrainians to go take over Poland, and then it conscripts all the Poles to go take over somewhere else. They've done that before, right? They're sort of this Ponzi empire, right? They just roll on and like conscripting the latest batch of conquests to fight the next batch of conquests. It is an old Mongol tactic, actually. Old like sort of steppe tactic that the Russians sort of learned from those guys. And so we wanted them not to start unrolling Europe, unraveling Europe and like conquering Europe bit by bit. We wanted to protect the West from the barbarians in Ukraine. And I think that's, Europe's an important trading partner. It's an important diplomatic partner, or what used to be, and so before Trump. And so like there were many reasons to want to protect Europe, and the nature of the Russian attack made it a long-term danger to Europe. And so we stopped them by helping the Ukrainians just stand up to them, And so that was good. Israel, like, opinions differ. Like, it's our most important ally in the region, say some people, and other people are like, well, do we really care about that region right now? Like, we don't need their oil. Like, what's going on? And then, but, I think that people argue about that. In terms of India and Pakistan, they're both basically our allies. Although Pakistan, we have more like formal agreements with them, I think. But we used to. Traditionally, we were Pakistan's Cold War ally, and Russia was India's Cold War ally. But Pakistan really screwed us a lot. They, temporarily protected bin Laden. They, a lot of people like Pakistan really was not a good ally to us. They were a shitty ally for a long time. And India's interests and ours are much more aligned. We're both sort of exposed Chinese expansionism in the region. We, both support democracy, or at least did until Trump. We both, there's many areas of alignment between us and India. In fact, even on the right, like a lot of people want to align with Modi's India because he's sort of anti-Islamic or ish. He would say he's not, and his supporters would say he's not, but he's perceived as being as such. So, so I think some people would want on the right would want to ally with them because of that. And it's just bigger, more technologically advanced, more faster growing. Pakistan's a stagnant, poor, dysfunctional, crappy place. So our interests lie with India more, but we're officially, also buddies with Pakistan, so we not really a lot of upside to us in getting involved on one side or another of that conflict. So we just sort of sit back and try to broker a peace deal, which I think we eventually may have done. It's not clear what actually happened because these India and Pakistan wars especially are filled with like disinformation. They're both very, very good countries at just throwing a bunch of chaff out in the out into the social media verse and no one can tell what the hell's going on.
Got it. So going forward, what do you expect to happen here?
I don't know. I think, I think at some point they'll fight again. Those terrorist groups are still there. Pakistan is probably angry at how easily its bases were attacked, and India is angry because, at least one or two of its fighters were shot down. There was sort of this sideshow where a Chinese fighter run by Pakistan shot down a French fighter piloted by India because the Chinese fighter had a very long range missile and radar. And so it allowed it to see the Indian fighter from a long way away. And so that sort of caused some people to think, oh my gosh, is the West inferior? Does the West have inferior weapons to China? Both those fighters are like a little bit old. Honestly, they're not like the top of the line things. They're not really like very stealthy. They're not, so there was just a pretty good long range missile. And like, honestly, but it's a good reminder that in conflicts, you take losses. Like some of your fighters will be shot down, no matter how good they are. So yeah, anyway, I think that was a little bit of a sideshow, but maybe a little played up, overrated, but maybe will galvanize some people into taking Chinese military hardware seriously, which they really should. So that's good in that sense. And then, yeah, so I think that basically just illustrates that we're living in a little more dangerous world post Pax Americana.
Got it. And so this is just a further sign of us being post Pax Americana, both for sort of cultural reasons, our own sort of determination that we want to be that sort of isolationist posture, but also military realities.
Right, exactly. So just military industrial realities. We don't build a lot of stuff. And I think that is even more vividly illustrated by the failure of the anti-Houthi campaign. Trump backed off because basically we did a bunch of, we bombed the Houthis a lot, but they're just underground, right? We don't have bombs that go through rock very well. When we do, that's going to be a weird world. We will, by the way, the thing that does that is drones. You release a whole bunch of micro drones. They go into they find the caves, they go into the caves and they shoot you or explode. So that will happen someday. We will be able to get into the tunnels and then, tunneling won't work. And then we're in a weird world. That aside, we failed to defeat the Houthis, and the Houthis had some pretty good missiles, from Iran. Not amazing missiles. Like Iran stuff is all kind of mid, but it's like serviceable. It's okay. And we had to send in our jets really close, and we sent in F-35s really close. Now, F-35s from a long way away are very resistant to radar, right? They're stealthy. If you have them up close, maybe you could see them because they're just so big and obvious. Like it's not invisible. It's not a cloak. It's not a cloaking device. All right. It's stealth just means that you absorb radar you just absorb radar. So from a long way away, it's hard to see the F-35. When you get in close, it's hot. Those engines burn hot. And so if you got some crappy, mid-level sort of infrared based heat-seeking missile, like heat-seeking missile, right? Remember when you're a kid, you'd hear the words heat-seeking missile because that's what they used to use when we were kids. And now Houthis still use that, and it's not bad. And like the F-35 saw it coming and dodged because like heat-seeking missiles aren't as good at like tracking you and like, keeping locked onto you or whatever. The heat, I don't know why. Anyway, but then so the F-35 just dodged, but people are like, oh my God, the most expensive fighter jet in the world almost got downed by this ragtag militia. Well, yeah, I mean, like the point is that if you send your super weapons in close, so that you're going to take a few losses, even to some schlubs. And this, we've tried to compensate for the loss of our defense industrial base by just building even better weapons, like perfect super weapons. But you can't really do that. Like that's not really possible. Like, you're going to take losses. And the thing about China's stuff is whether it's the best or the worst, whether it's the best or merely okay, it's not the worst. For China, they can always just build more. Our losses are irreplaceable while their losses are replaceable. As long as that continues to be true, they can win a war. They can defeat us in a war, and there's nothing we can do. Like China would beat us in a war now because they can replace their losses and we can't. Suppose we kill them at a 5-to-1 ratio because our weapons are super. They just respawn, and we don't respawn. Like wars last. They don't last. They last more than like a week. And we estimate that we'd run out of missile stockpiles against China in 9 days, I think. That's probably an optimistic estimate. It'd probably be shorter. So there's no way we could win a war against China because we don't have a defense industrial base. This is why I said Elon Musk would be the Secretary of Defense. He should be the Secretary of Defense. He would know how to do this. He would know how to resuscitate our defense industrial base very quickly. He'd know what needed to be done. I don't know who else can do it. And so, yeah, we're currently on track to lose a major war to China because we can't rebuild our stuff. Sorry, that's just the way it is. It doesn't matter how good our weapons are relative to theirs. Our military edge in terms of technology has been shrinking, but focusing on that is a massive distraction from the production side. We cannot match them in production. We just can't. We'll run out of ammo. We'll run out of stuff, and they won't run out of stuff because building wins. One in World War II, one in the Civil War. It wins every war.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays, the same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com.
And so if in a few years you were like, hey, when we spoke in, May 2025, I wasn't super stoked about our military, but something changed and we're now in a pretty good spot. What would need to change?
What we need to change is the first thing we need to do is revive the defense industrial base by law. We need to say, if you want to make a little shop to make, metal parts or chemicals or whatever for the US military, you will have a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. Go make that shop. Do that. As long as you produce good quality, we will buy your stuff. That's a good job to have. We commit to you, sort of multi-year, long-term pre-purchase agreements for just new companies. We need to say that banks are exempted from capital rules if they invest in defense production to make a wave of private sector bank lending. We have to do industrial policy for every specific thing that we need to be able to make. We need to very quickly revive the defense industrial base, and this will involve a large increase in military spending. It will also involve cutting military spending on a lot of other stuff, especially deployment, probably also healthcare. Everyone's going to hate that, but especially deployment. So we spend massive amounts on our military, but a lot of that is just sailing our Navy around the world and basing our bases around the world. We're going to need to massively reduce our global presence to focus on the defense industrial base. That's what we need to do. We're probably not going to do this because the administration's dumb and because people just don't know that this needs to be done, and because the people who do know that this needs to be done tend to be of the, hey, throw money at my startup variety, instead of the I am a large industrialist planning a giant industrial build out with a lot of small and medium enterprises that can't be funded by VC kind of thing. And so we need that massive ecosystem very quickly. We need multi-year pre-purchasing agreements are the way to do it. We're going to need to increase spending and massively decrease deployment to save costs on our military. And we're going to need industrial policy, and we're going to need a lot of stuff like that. We're going to need to do this fast, and we're going to need to also work with partners. We're going to have Japan and Korea build us a lot of stuff. We're going to have India build us a lot of stuff. Stuff that requires lots of cheap labor, India can build. We need to do that right now. And so we need to just get on that yesterday. And we're not on it. We're not on it. No one, like, no one's going to even take me seriously about this, because to half the people, like, defense spending bad, we need to cut it so we can pay for more welfare on the lib side. And on the con side, it's like, who is this lib to be telling us this bullshit? Who is this guy to be telling us America isn't invincible, the greatest country in the world, America, make America great again? But those people aren't going to listen to me either, because, like, I'm a lib, and so what do I know? And so we're just cooked, because, like, everyone who knows what we need to do. I think the one person who could have saved us on this and could have bailed us out on this is Elon Musk, and I don't think he's going to do it. In fact, he's stepping back in a big way from politics.
Yeah, I heard that too. Well, first off, I just want to say I feel like you've built up, some centrist credentials, by sort of talking, being willing to talk to your own to progressives in your party and say, hey, here's where I agree or sympathize, but here's where I strongly disagree and think we should move away from. So maybe people listening.
Well, maybe someone out there is listening to me. My biggest hope for having influence here is to have a conservative person who's open-minded hear me and then launder these ideas. I need these to be laundered through someone with conservative credentials, because I'm right, and I'm saying things that if the Trump administration and all the conservatives realize this, they would want to do independently of me. But I'm right about this. What I need is to have a conservative say this and not say this came from this lib, and just say, I need to convince a few open-minded conservatives of this so they can say it, because I'm not a credible messenger to the Trump administration.
I feel like Lonsdale would be open to this. You think Lonsdale would disagree with some? He's criticized, sort of the military as being like a right-wing sort of welfare thing too, in terms of, like, a lot of pork there.
I know Lonsdale, but he's a very argumentative and stubborn man who I don't think I've ever managed to change his mind about anything. Through a long time of talking to him. That's fine. Some people are like that. I mean, like, that's an entrepreneur personality, right? You're like, my thesis is right. My company will win. You need that kind of personality to, like, drive through companies, whatever. You need that. But also, he's of the, like, fix everything by funding my drone boat startup kind of guy. He has a big drone boat startup, and that's fine. I'm not saying those startups are bad. We need those. It's good. We should put money toward that, and it won't hurt. It will help. It just won't do everything. And so I don't think Lonsdale wants to be or could be the right messenger for this necessarily. I think we need people at the Heritage Foundation. Like, that's who Trump trusts. That's his inner circle. Trump is entirely focused on, like, personal domestic political conflicts, not on, like, China. He's got advisors who are focused on that. But who has his ear? I guess maybe Marco Rubio, now that Marco Rubio is, like, wearing 10 hats in the US government. Like, I said, tired, replace jobs with AI. Wired, replace jobs with Marco Rubio. like maybe Marco Rubio, it could get to him, but I don't think we're in the same information ecosystem. Like, I don't know anyone who has the ear of Marco Rubio who could hear this. And so there are some people talking about it, but it's just like stuff moves slow. And I think that so far the Trump administration's, focus has been entirely on domestic ideological battles, must purge the wokeness. I don't think so. They see China as this big threat. And Trump just thinks he has this super powerful military that can do anything. All he has to do is wave his hand in command, and my army will go destroy them. Ha, ha, ha. Like, I think that's how he thinks. Like, and that failed with the Houthis, but I don't know that he's going to learn a lesson here. Well, I think the lesson to learn is go bully someone weaker than the Houthis, even weaker, right? Like, he did this with ISIS. Like, ISIS in his first term was, causing some chaos in the Middle East, and he's just like, military, go beat ISIS. And they did. They just did it. And ISIS was not that. The Houthis have like arms from Iran and a lot of experience being bombed. And so they're just much better at this than ISIS was. And like, also we relied a lot on local proxies to beat ISIS, but then with the Houthis, we're not doing that. So we're doing the aerial bomb campaign without the ground proxies to drive them out, which we had against ISIS. We had the Kurds, we had the, some Iraqi army people and et cetera. So then, but the Kurds really helped us, the battle-hardened ground force against ISIS. They really kicked ISIS's ass, which is funny, by the way, because the Kurds are like very gender equal in their army. So like the women all fight. It's kind of like Israel. And so it's like ISIS actually literally got their ass kicked by girls. So that's cool. Anyway, I don't think they like that, but anyway, they're dead. So, but Trump couldn't do this to the Houthis, and I think his lesson will be go bully someone weaker than the Houthis.
Just to really flesh out or make concrete the sort of the difference here, what do you think that's different about what it's going to take for us to get back to military dominance than the conservatives we're talking about here? Like, where is the fundamental disagreement on the military defense side?
With who?
With sort of, either people in the Trump admin or some of, we were talking about sort of the Andrew or Hadrian types, or just sort of
we will lose the war to China because we can't replenish our weapons and they can. That's it. I've seen people writing about this at Heritage. I've seen people writing about this at AEI, whatever, like, these DC insider right-wing think tanks. And like, I don't think they're getting a lot of attention. I see Trump wanting to boost military spending by a little bit, but I see him using most of the money for tax cuts. This is not a time we can afford to cut taxes, but yet we're going to do it. So I don't know.
So we are not prepared for the future of warfare. We have not.
No, we're not. We're not. And it's not just about the kinds of weapons we have, although there is a little bit of that. Like I don't think we've internalized the importance of drones yet. But I think that we need that shift. And Elon talks about this shift and other people talk about this shift. Obviously, Andrew does. But then, so I think that the shift toward drones as the primary weapon of war is underappreciated and important, and we need to do that. But I think far more is just this defense industrial thing. We'll need ammo. Like a drone needs to shoot something, right? And what does a drone shoot? A missile. We need missiles. We need the propellant for missiles. We need the housings and whatever for missiles. We need the chips to guide the missiles. We need like all these things for missiles, and we don't have any missiles. Like we have only a few missiles, and this is why we stopped. This is the other reason we stopped against the Houthis was because like we were using up all our tiny supply of missiles. Like we don't have enough stockpiles. But also I would say that there's almost no war that's fought with pre-war stockpiles. The stockpiles always run out, and then people build more, and the war doesn't end until after the building phase is reached. We can't build any missiles. Can't build any drones. We're just going to lose this war. And so I don't know what else to say. Like we're going to lose that war. If you don't like that, maybe what you can do is go click over to a piece of Twitter that says America always wins everything, and will tell you something different than what I just told you. But then the thing will happen. And then after we lose the war, people who didn't want to think about us losing the war before the war will then spend all their time pointing fingers and assigning blame. And, first it'll be distraction and cope, and then it'll be a blame game afterwards. This is the problem with Cassandra's, like even after the fact, you're not like, oh, I guess we should have listened to Cassandra. Maybe we'll listen to her next time. I guess she died, right? Anyway.
So the solution is this needs to be a public sector solution. It can't just be, the private sector is not going to solve it on its own, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, because like the public sector always solves defense. Like defense is a public good. There's no country that just has private citizens volunteering to defend the country, and that's what works, right? But then but defense contractors will always be private companies. It's not going to be government, state-owned enterprises, right? We're not the USSR. So like private companies working on government contracts that is how defense stuff gets made. What I mean is we need the government to do a lot differently than it's doing, and it's not. So I don't know how to get this message out there. I don't know who has the ear of the people, and I don't know whether anyone really cares. They're just going to cope. They're just going to click over to like rah-rah jingoistic bullshit like America always wins. How can the weak, wimpy Chinese beat us? The most just frantic cope I've ever seen. And then like, then afterwards it'll shift from cope to blame. I don't know. I do not know how to get people scared about this and with the requisite level of seriousness about this. I do not know. What do you think? I mean, is what I'm saying resonating? Like, have I worried you? Have I managed to scare you?
Yeah, well, you've definitely intrigued me to become much more educated on this issue. That's why I'm asking all these questions. I'm like, how is this not? Because you would think that Republicans, this is the issue in which they would be strongest at, right? This is the thing that, this isn't some sort of, social liberal issue. This is the military. This is sort of like, power, strength. This is the thing that conservatives, Republicans, historically have cared a lot about. And so it seems odd that sort of they're dropping the ball there.
Yeah. Yep. Massively dropping the ball. I don't know. I mean, like, yeah. So go see if you think I'm right. Like, I mean, look at how much I can forward you a million links about. Yeah, I've been writing about it again and again. I can forward you a million links about how just Google America can't build missiles. You don't even need to ask AI, but you should ask AI. Ask O3. Say, look at the most recent statistics. How many missiles does America produce versus how many does China produce? What will be the main weapons of war? How many drones do we produce versus how many ships do we produce versus blah, blah, blah. All these things, planes, look at these things. And then, in typical ask AI, in typical wars, how fast do stocks get used up? Are wars fought with initial stock? You can check literally anything I've told you by asking O3 and by Googling. Like this information is all there. That's how I learned it. Well, I mean, I mostly not O3, but like I learned it by just Googling and reading articles and reading stuff and reading and reading. And like you can also do that. But will you, and will other people do it? Or will they, simply say, well, maybe Noah's right, and maybe someone who disagrees with Noah's right, and I have work to do, so I'm not going to figure out who's right.
Right. I'll take it upon myself to do that work, and also to bring someone in, whether it's, I keep trying to get Chris from Adrian or someone else, so we could have a deeper conversation about it with somebody who's working on it as well, to just get a sense for how they were thinking about it. Are they as concerned? Do they what do they think are the solutions as well? But let's segue this for now, because I want to return to something we spoke about 2 weeks ago, which is we talked about sort of the misconceptions around globalization, and sort of people saying it hollowed out the middle class, et cetera. And you had a great piece about how it didn't, or not in the way that we typically think. But you had a follow-up where you talked about, hey, there was some wage sort of contraction or stagnation, but it was before globalization started, or it was between this sort of 1973 to 1994 time period. So why don't you talk a little bit about, when you unpack that, say what happened there, and what does it mean in terms of how we should make sense of understanding this history?
Yeah. So basically, if you look at American middle class wages for regular workers, or just, anything like that, you see this pattern where in the, the 25 to 30 years after World War II, they grew very steadily. And then they stopped growing for about 20 years after that. And then they started growing again, not quite as fast as before, but, sort of almost as fast, but a little less evenly as well, a little more bumpy. It was very smooth and even wage growth right after World War II, but then been a little more bumpier since the 90s. But then in the, from 1973 through 1994, during those 2 decades, wages grew really slow. They grew slow overall. They grew slow for men, or even fell for men. And for women, they grew more slowly than at other times. And so then the question is, why? What happened? Why did wage growth slow down and then start back up again? The short answer is we don't know, because it's macroeconomics. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on. You can't just say, oh, this correlates with this other thing. But what you can do is the sort of first pass exercise where you look at where the timing lines up with these sort of hypotheses.
And say more about that.
Oh, so for example, financialization. People are like, okay, in the, we remember Gordon Gekko. He bought this airline and just fired everybody so he could make a quick buck. We know private equity does stuff like that. We know there's more, finance became a bigger share of the economy. We know that, sort of the short-term quarterly earnings focus of stockholders could make industrial companies not invest for the future. All these things. And so, but when you look at financialization, if you just look at finance as a percent of the economy, it just was on this slow upward climb since World War II. And there's nothing special about that 20-year period, right? And if you look at financial profits, they went up even later. They just went up later than that period. There was nothing, and even decline in the 70s. There was nothing really special about finance, in the aggregate statistics during the 70s and 80s that wasn't true at other times when wages were growing. So the timing doesn't quite line up. People say, oh, the death of unions. Well, I believe that could have had an effect, but then you see unions pretty much steadily dying since like the mid 50s. And then, it doesn't exactly line up with the wage stagnation. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily line exactly up, although it probably had some sort of effect, by taking away the union wage premium for people. And then, so those are some of the ideas. The one thing that does line up with this is the productivity slowdown. So what's interesting is that right around 1973, productivity basically flatlined in America and in many other countries. And then it reaccelerated in the 90s. And that coincides exactly with the wage slowdown. What's interesting, though, is that although productivity slowed down, it kept growing. So it didn't actually flatline. It grows more slowly. But then wages suffer even more than productivity during these 20 years. Then the question is why? Is there some sort of like feedback mechanism from productivity to wages that exceeds even the obvious? Obviously productivity and wages should match up, but maybe low productivity also causes a bunch of other stuff to happen in the economy. It, reduces the power of, or it increases the market power of companies so they can hold down wages more, or it, makes all these people retrain. I don't know. I'm making stuff up, but like, that's the only one where the timing really coincides. But we don't understand theoretically why a productivity slowdown would curb wages even more than productivity, right? Wages and productivity should roughly match up. But here, the wages actually lagged productivity during that time. So why did that happen? And so we've got this little bit of a mystery. And so with all the others, the timing doesn't quite line up. So what instead you find yourself having to do is come up with this patchwork of explanations. So like, okay, in the 70s, inflation eroded real purchasing power, right? And then in the 80s, you had a trade deficit, and then you had a little more rapid deunionization and a little more rapid financialization. So you can say it was one damn thing after another. It was one thing in the 70s, another thing in the 80s. So you can do that, but then at some point it becomes overdetermined, right? You have so many explanations, you don't know which one. There's too many explanations. You don't know which one to pick, and so at that point you have to look more subtly at a lot of econometric details that are way beyond a blog post.
Where is productivity now, by the way? Like, are we outside? Is the Great Stagnation over?
That's a great question. And so like productivity surged after the pandemic and then sort of decreased again. Let me look at what the most recent numbers are, actually. Okay, so then labor productivity surged during and after the pandemic, flatlined during 2021, dipped during the beginning of 2022, and has been then growing again at a decent, pretty rapid clip since mid 2022. We've seen this, but then in the most recent quarter, it did fall a little bit, but that could just be noise. So anyway, we've seen overall since the pandemic, productivity has grown at about the same as the pre-pandemic trend, or maybe a little faster. So then that's good. We're getting solid productivity growth that allows us to have wage growth without inflation. So that's one reason we were able to bring inflation down with rate hikes, is because productivity was doing okay, so that it was more easy to tame inflation. So we've actually been doing pretty well on productivity recently. There's a little bit of an upturn, but not a huge upturn. Let's look at the percentage growth rates. Let's look at this one, and let's look at annual. And yeah, so like, since the pandemic, it's been like 2 to 2.7 kind of thing, with this dip in end of 21, beginning of 22. You had this dip in productivity, but then you've had return to reasonably robust growth, faster than we've had since the mid 2000s. Like, it's basically faster than we've had since 2005, except for like some composition effects. That's good. Or faster than we've had since 2004. And that's good because but what we haven't seen as much is total factor productivity go up. But total factor productivity, it also takes into account the productivity not just of labor but of capital too. But so that hasn't gone up as much, but then it's also really hard to measure, and like, ideally you want to measure it like many years later, because it's hard to measure. So I don't know what's going on with that.
Tyler Cowen said the great stagnation will be over once we have self-driving cars, and we have self-driving cars. So
All right. Well, here they are. You can take a Waymo. Yeah, I think, I'm bullish on AI improving productivity. I think we have a lot of space to improve productivity in the energy sector. Maybe this can take us to my post from yesterday if you want to talk about that one. Have you read that one yet?
the one about the future, yes.
Yeah. So like one theme I've been harping on, because I think people don't understand it, is that we're in the middle of this big shift in physical technology. Everyone focuses on the shift in digital technology. Everyone focuses on AI. AI replacing traditional coding, AI replacing the web, AI replacing this and that, and just applications of AI. This is all great. I love AI. I'm more bullish on AI than most people, and I like it more. I'm excited about it and not nervous about it. Right? I should say that Americans are unusually pessimistic about AI. When you look at different countries, China's the most optimistic. America's super pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I'm like, this is great, man. I got a robot that talks to me and tells me useful stuff and can like do stuff. Cool. I got a robot. Like I grew up seeing like C-3PO. Now I've got him. Like, yes, it's more like C-3PO than R2-D2. So it's a little goofy a lot of the time. And C-3PO hallucinates and makes shit up. But like, I've got C-3PO now. I've got like the holodeck from Star Trek and the computer from Star Trek. There's like, hey, computer, tell me, run a diagnostic. And the computer's like, all right. And it does it. I've got that now. That's cool. We made it for real. And now everybody's upset. Like, were people watching Star Trek being like, but what will artists do when you can just prompt the holodeck? Like, your holodeck, you're stealing my art. It's like, shut up. No one said that. They just watched Star Trek and they're like, wow, cool, man, holodeck. Now it comes up and it's like, no, use a real human artist. Don't use this slop, blah, blah, blah. Like, come on, man, you're living in the sci-fi future. Adapt, enjoy the future. Anyway, rant over, but America is doing well in AI technology despite our pessimism. We've got OpenAI, Anthropic, and all these other companies, XAI, I don't know. We've got lots of applications of AI. We're doing well in AI. China's doing well, but we're doing well in AI despite our silly pessimism. And Trump has canceled even the Biden administration's like weak ass regulations on AI. There was this sort of progressive mini movement to like super regulate AI, and AI will be the tech bros, making technology to destroy us all, and Asimoglu and all these guys. It's funny, I went to like an abundance conference a few years ago, and then like everybody was super pro abundance, yelling about NIMBYs, praising industrial policy, build the housing, build the factories, build all these things. Then when it came to AI, suddenly their tune changed. And they were like, well, what we need is a council of social science professors to like regulate what technologists are allowed to invent before they happen. I was like, that's the most batshit insane idea I've ever had. And so the last hour of this was me just yelling at those people and them yelling at me. I was not invited back. But anyway, so that happened. But the Trump administration has canceled even Biden's weak ass regulations on AIs. And then the stronger regulation in California failed, as you know.
What is your thoughts on AI policy? Like, what do you think we should be doing? Or is it something different than what the Trump admin is doing?
No, the Trump administration's policy on AI is fine. I mean, like, we need skilled immigration. The AI engineers are all leaving.
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, you're not part of Western civilization. You're this, disease on the body of Western civilization. Also, how would you like to build some AI for us? How about no?
There's a talented person right now at one of the big the biggest lab, basically, who can't get back into the country, who works there. And I'm like, why aren't we, creating special visas for these people?
Yeah, pure idiocy. Pure idiocy. You can see why I'm pessimistic about the defense stuff, right? When I see that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, our immigration policy is absolutely hurting our AI supremacy and our AI progress. And that's really terrible. And also, like, I don't know how much government science funding cuts are going to hurt AI specifically, but I think they will to some degree. Like, a lot of what AI can do is accelerate science. You have like, DeepMind finding all new protein folding stuff this is the classic example. But you've got, yes, there was a econ paper about AI and material science. It was totally fabricated and fake. That was funny, but they caught him. It was very easy to catch, actually. But then AI is going to accelerate hard tech. It's going to accelerate science. It's going to accelerate material science and biology and all these things. And yet we're not going to fund those. We're not going to pony up the money for that because we're worried that like these scientists are going to be too woke. Like, okay, but then the cost of that is that you fall behind on a lot of AI applications. But I think that the most important thing is just immigration. AI is, it's compute plus data plus talent. Those are the three things that go into making AI, right? I mean, that's what all the tech people say. And then, so we've got the compute, that's fine. We've got the data, that's fine. I don't know. There was some big deal about China having all this more data for like computer vision convolutional neural nets from its like surveillance state, like maybe a little bit, but like, okay, it's fine if people take pictures of everything. And anyway, so then we're fine on data. What we lack is talent, because we're kicking it out of the country. So that's AI policy is very weak on the talent side. We need that overseas talent. And you need to be able to look at an Indian AI researcher or whatever and not say, you are, you're taking jobs from Americans. You're taking jobs from white people. You're not, you don't respect Western civilization enough, and you're an unassimilable, foreigner with some weird religion. You're not gonna like that's shit that should have been left a century ago, right? That you're kicking out the AI researchers because you think they're like anti-Western civilization. Elon went to war on Twitter with like Laura Loomer and all the rightists about this on Christmas time. Remember that war? That little the Christmas war over Indian immigration. Elon was right. Everyone, like all those rightists, were just wrong and stupid and bad. Like, I've lived around Indian immigrants my whole life, and not a one has ever degraded the fabric of Western civilization in any perceptible way. It's Laura Loomer stupid, and like all these guys, like these are just some of the stupidest guys. You saw this guy who, Josiah Lippincott, and he was just saying like, Indians took my job, look how smart I was, blah, blah, blah. And then people started asking questions. It turned out he was really dumb.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of guy that's getting listened to on the right.
Some very not smart people, it's like, yeah, on both sides, who get disproportionate airtime, and right now it's the right's time. And
that's right. Like, there was even this attempt to brand them the woke right. I don't know what that was about. That term didn't really stick because it was confusing. But it's just saying like, we thought woke people are stupid and we think you're stupid. So stupid. And it's true. They are stupid. Like, there are people in 2018 getting up there and saying like, white people are literally demons at corporate training sessions. And then like, then you had other people on Twitter defending that as like giving people of color the chance to, vent their centuries of pent up frustration. We should do that. Tell white people they're demons. That was dumb as hell. And yet now you've got people saying like, these AI researchers, like Indian AI researchers, are a threat to Western civilization. You've never met an AI researcher. Like, you're stupid, and yet you're getting to say this because you've been given the ear of this populist movement via social media, and social media is taking over politics. And now the one with the most viral message will defeat people with more reasonable messages. And so Elon had a more reasonable message on this one, and he just sort of, he shadow banned Laura Loomer, and then he just cracked down on these guys. But then, and he was right to do that, but then like nothing came of that at the top level. Stephen Miller still thinks like Indians are a plague. Maybe JD Vance doesn't think that, but like it's not clear how much influence he has over how much he's going to go to bat for that either. Is JD Vance going to go? He's married an Indian American, but like, is he going to go to bat for letting Indian people into the country? Like, I don't know. And so it's hard to say. I think we're doing badly on this. But that wasn't the main thrust of my post yesterday. The main thrust of my post yesterday was about electrical technology, physical technology. Another thing that Elon completely understands that the right in general does not understand. So Indian immigrants are good and electrical technology is good. Two things Elon understands and the right does not understand. And so basically, there's a big technological shift, which is that batteries and motors got good enough, and batteries, motors, and something called power transistors which you need for like motors. Those three things got good enough where electricity is going to replace combustion for a lot of things. And I guess solar panels, So you're going to replace, so for power generation, solar is going to replace like, a lot of coal, whatever. And then for like electric cars, you've got powerful motors, that super high torque, like a Tesla accelerates faster than a Lamborghini. Right? A Lamborghini can't keep up with a Tesla on the road. There's a reason for that. It's called magnets. It's these crystalline magnets that hold lots and lots and lots of magnetic charge, or whatever it's called, magnetic field density. And then, so we got those things, and suddenly electric vehicles are amazing. And you still don't have as much energy density for your fuel with the battery, but you compensate by not having any extraction machinery. So you open up an old gas car and you look and you see a bunch of tubes, right? Metal tubes, those tubes are for combustion. That's where the gases go, and and the pressure, they regulate the pressure and the gas and the heat and all that stuff. That's called an engine. It's based on thermodynamics. And the theory for this is hundreds of years old. And so then you have an engine, you create a controlled explosion of your gas, and it pushes a thing, and that thing turns gears, and that turns your wheels. That's how a car works. But so you don't just need this gas tank, you need this huge machinery to extract and use all the energy. When you have a battery, the battery is much bigger than your gas tank because the energy density is a lot less. The theoretical upper limit energy density on batteries is about the same as oil, but like we're not going to get close to that. So your battery is much bigger and heavier than your gas tank. But how do you get energy out? Just a tiny little piece of metal. You don't need any of those tubes. All right. You don't need any of those tubes. You just need a little wire. And then you turn, you're like, oh, now you have electricity. Turn magnets. Yay, magnets. And so then it just goes, and then your car goes, right? And you can get, with magic magnets, you can get very high torque. And so you can go fast, go, speed, acceleration, 0 to 60, that's what you get. And so then drones, okay, you still have big drones powered by oil. You have the Shahed drones, like put, 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 with its little lawnmower motor. You have the MQ-9 Reaper that the Houthis shot down a bunch, like just zooming along. But then, like, if you look on the battlefields of Ukraine, what are the drones that are winning all the battles? It's battery-powered DJI drones. It's your little quadcopter. It's a little video game thing, and it has a little explosive strap to it, which it can drop on you or like suicide you or whatever, right? Run into you, anything. And so you've got these little drones, and you've got just hundreds of thousands of these swarms of these little guys just flooding the sky. That's how wars are fought now, at least up close on the ground level. It's replacing artillery, it's replacing infantry with guns, it's replacing all these things. Just massive, massive, massive drones. Drone barrage. And that uses a battery because there's no room for a gas tank in that little guy. Gas tank is big, battery small. And so you don't need that much energy to get to the front. It's not like a super long range thing. So that's why short range batteries are just winning. Okay. We don't have long range, bomber drones yet, but the Shahed will be replaced by something with a battery eventually. The little lawnmower motor will be replaced by a battery eventually. And so more and more of the air and sky are being replaced by combustion's being replaced by electricity, right? EVs, drones. And then for appliances, we all love Impulse, right? Financial disclosure, I'm invested heavily in Impulse. But yeah, we all love Impulse, and Impulse is going to be, it's like the best stove, and because it has a battery instead of combustion. And so that's going to be more and more things like your leaf blower, your, I don't know, your washing machine dryer, your hot water heater, your heat pump, which will replace your air conditioner, all these things. Like electricity will replace combustion. Combustion will be used increasingly only for things where you need truly massive amounts of power, like a big jet plane, or like a rocket, or like, a really big truck or piece of construction machinery. Like you'll need the gas to provide that super power. You can release like lots of power, but batteries will replace more and more. We're going to have battery powered military vehicles. Like a tank's too big. It just gets shot down by little battery powered drones with explosive charges, drones just kill all the tanks. And so then or javelins, like those little missiles, shoulder mounted missiles, they kill tanks too. And so tanks are kind of done, and the Russians are attacking on bikes. The Russians are attacking on bikes. It's Mad Max out there, man. And those bikes will all be powered by batteries. They will be e-bikes. E-bikes will be the attack vehicle of the future. And so ground stuff's going to be replaced too. And there'll be a shrinking, maybe ships where you have all this corrosion. A battery gets corroded much more easily than a fuel tank. So then you have these ships, maybe some will be powered still by diesel or whatever, but you're going to have a shrinking set of things where combustion is the thing. Rockets obviously will be combustion, but like you have a shrinking set of things. Combustion is going to be this niche thing, right? Cars and drones are the two big ones, and appliances. Cars, drones, and appliances, including like heating. Those three things. Replace those, and power generation, 4. Replace those 4 things, and it's the end of the age of thermodynamics, man. It's the end of the age of combustion. Sorry, Carnot. It's Carnot. I mean, it's James Clerk Maxwell has defeated you. The electricity is one. It was just, it always offered us finer control, but finally we fixed some of the power and energy density problems with electricity. So now we can just replace combustion for 90% of the things we do. And America's fallen behind. It's fallen behind. You say this on Twitter and people still say like solar and batteries are shit technology, man. You'll get people with tens of thousands of followers saying this retardation. They don't understand the technology at all. They say stupid, like 20-year-old bullshit like, hey, the sun's not always shining, so solar power won't. I mean, like, use a battery. And then they're like, but a battery costs too much. Like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Look at the cost of battery. And then they're like, well, it's shit. It has to be subsidized. If it's not bad technology, why would you subsidize it? Like, and you're an idiot because you always have to subsidize things that are militarily useful. China's subsidized. Like, we surely subsidized oil and gas stuff when that was militarily useful. But yeah, that stuff will win without subsidies. But if America wants to be in control of that and not import it all from China, then we'll have to subsidize. It's not the weakness of the technology; it's Chinese competition. But idiots don't understand this, and they think if they just say this idiocy again and again, and just relentlessly, publicly, aggressively fail to understand technology, that technology will change, and that you can just fight the future by tweets. You can't fight the future with tweets, and everyone thinks they can.
Let's end on that note. One, because it's a great note to end on. We can't fight the future with tweets, but also because I have another meeting I'm a couple minutes late for it. That I'm gonna let you go too. But this has been a great discussion on sort of our military capacity or lack thereof and the future of warfare. Noah, as always, until next time.
Until next time, sir.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.